So let's take a look at a relatively cheap Asus router. This is a dual band AX router, so a Wi-Fi 6 router, has 2.4 and 5 GHz frequency, does have a 1.5 GHz quad-core CPU, and I really like the Asus UI. I'm kind of used to that on my main router. This one I just want to connect to all my IoT devices, so I can isolate those on my network completely. This is just what I'm going to use it for, but of course you could just use it as your main router. I feel like it is a pretty good deal. You do get 3 years of warranty. You of course have to go and register it on Asus's website, and you do also have the AI Protect, so it could protect you a little bit against like malicious websites and so on. You could also use it as a AI mesh. You have some more information here on the front side of the box in various different languages, and more on the side here as well as some QR codes. We do also have 4 gigabit LAN port as well as 1 gigabit WAN, 1 USB 3.1 and 1 USB 2.0. So you could also use this as a little storage server if you want to, and you can also use it as a 4G internet router, which is kind of a nice little thing. So you can have a fallback to 4G if you like have issues with your main connection. But of course you can also just use it for Samba, FTP servers and print servers as well. We have 2 antennas, external antennas, and we do also have 256 megabyte of flash storage as well as 512 megabyte of DDR3 RAM, 2.4 and 5 GHz frequency, and of course supports up to AX, so Wi-Fi 6 standard. I believe it does also support WPA3, but probably you need a later firmware than it comes with out of the box, but at least here on the packaging it says WPA2. And of course you have all of these functions here, and you can use it as a router, but I plan just to use it as a access point. And it does come with a power supply, 12 volt at 2 amps, a little bit of Asus branding here on the top. The other side here you can kind of see the layout on the back. So of course you do have a WAN port, you have a quad LAN connection or gigabit LAN connection there, as well as those USB we talked about, WPS button, reset button, DC socket, and as well as power switch. And of course the WAN plug there is nicely blue colored, so it's easy to see or distinguish between the other ones, because you need to of course plug your internet into that one to be secure behind a firewall. Else you could potentially just open up all the devices to the internet if you connect your internet to one of those other plugs there. And on the back side we do have more information, so we get up to 1800 megabits per second, and that is of course Wi-Fi 6, and we'll run some speed tests a little bit later as well. These are just some of the functions of this little router, so let's just get into it. Of course, cut through all the plastic here and get into the actual router itself. And this is of course what you're met with, a quick start guide here to quickly get you up and running. Other than that, we do get some, I believe, warranty information here in different languages. Oh, VIP member warranty notice, okay. But of course you need to go to asus.com, either create an account or log in and then register your device here. Or I guess you could also just send this one into Asus. I've just covered my serial numbers and so on, but yeah, you do have a little bit of a card there you could actually ship to Asus. And yeah, many different languages here. And then we do get the power supply, relatively small power supply. And as stated on the box, it is a 12 volt 2 amp power supply, so up to 24 watt. We'll also kind of test out in this video, just see how much wattage it actually sucks from the wall socket. I think 24 watt is a little high, but hopefully it doesn't suck as much power. And of course a standard barrel plug in the other end, so very easy to get a new power supply. 12 volt power supplies with like these, is it 5.5 millimeter barrel plugs are so common, so definitely easy to replace should something happen. And also you do get a LAN cable, relatively cheap, unshielded LAN cable. Will definitely get you up and running. But I always recommend just getting some proper shielded LAN cable, just so you can minimize potential interference from other devices and so on. But for shorter cable runs like this, it's definitely fine and should work for plentiful. Other than that, we of course have the router here. Let me just see what else is in the box. Actually a relatively thick manual. Kind of rare these days to see a thick manual like this, but I believe it's also in many different languages. So we do have English here, my native language, and so on and so on and so on. See the whole list here. So a lot of languages in this little instruction here. Of course, you go through all of the layouts, so from LEDs to like the plugs on the back, how to plug it in and how to connect it to your smartphone or to your computer. And you can also write your password here so you don't forget it. Keep it in a safe place. So yeah, pretty easy to get up and running. And that's all we get in the box. Let's get rid of that and have a closer look at this little router here. Get a little bit closer. Kind of like the look of this router. I don't know if you can actually see or say you like a look of a router, but yeah, I kind of like the look of it. I always think like Asus are doing a good job like designing routers. There's a little notch there inside the plastic. I don't know if you can actually see it, a little scratch or something like that. Just caught my eyes. Definitely not something that will come off, I think. It actually did. No issues then, but still. Nice looking little router. Asus logo here. Probably just plastic, but it's definitely high gloss plastic and gold in coloring. All of the LEDs here on the front. So all the LAN connections and also WAN here, as well as the 2.5 and 4 gigahertz and power as well. I hope we can turn these off, but not really a big issue because I'm gonna have this in another room personally, so I won't really see it. The front here, we do have this little nice design, kind of look like a high-end sports car, something like that. Side here, ventilation. Other side here, ventilation again. And on the bottom side here, we do have a lot of ventilation as well. So, of course, needs to get some air to get rid of all the heat. One nice thing about this one as well, you can actually wall mount it. And I believe you can hang it either way, like up or down. So that's kind of nice. Just need 2 screws, not included in the box. And we do have these pretty high rubber feet as well. Again, a nice thing because the little router here needs to, of course, get some air. The feet will raise it up a little bit from the surface and then plenty of air can get in. And also we do have air vents here on the side, on the top. Could get rid of a lot of heat. And then we have the antennas here on the back. These are not removable. Don't really mind that at all because previous Asus routers with removable antennas was just a big pain. They just came loose so easily, so we continually had to tighten them back up. Very annoying, but anyways, on the back side, we do have the USB port, so 3.0, 2.0 there, VPS button, and also reset switch. And we do have that quad switch on the back as well, 1 gig switch, and that is enough for all of my smart hardwired devices. I have 4 hardwired devices, and I believe 25 or something like that wireless devices I'm going to connect to this one. So from everywhere, from my Hue lighting to my surveillance cameras and so on and so on. And of course the WAN plug there, like we talked about, nice blue label, so easy to distinguish that between the other ones. Of course, plug your internet into this one, except if you're behind a firewall, you can of course plug it into any of the other ones there. We have a nice physical button for turning on and off, and of course DC in here as well. And the little plug here on the back is definitely very close to the antennas, but it's not really an issue. It's easy enough to get in and out again. And then of course we have the antennas, relatively long antennas actually. Surprised me a little bit they're this long, but that's of course just a good thing. We do have like 180 here, but of course it will stop where the plastic meet the antennas. You can actually see that if my camera would just focus, but you can see there's a little plastic stopper there on the antennas. So it will kind of stop there, and on this other side the same thing. And then of course up like so. We do have like 1, 2 positions. So you could leave it like this, put it in a stand or something like that. I probably end up doing that, so I'll just save a little bit of space on my shelf. But of course you could also just leave it on a table or shelf like this. And you have 2 positions then, keep the antennas in. So depending on where it's placed, the higher up, you probably just leave the antenna closer to flat or completely flat. The lower is down to the floor. Probably just should leave the antennas upright. So that's all of the hardware overlook or out of the way. Let's just try and plug it in, see how much power it actually sucks, and also go through the UI and run a speed test. So I have a LAN connection here that is going through my own firewall. We'll just plug it into one of the LAN plugs. But of course, if you connect it directly to the internet, definitely plug it into the WAN like said. If you are not protected behind a firewall, so plugged into LAN number 1, and all that's left to do really is just plugging in the power here. And the bottom one here is the wattage that this router actually uses. And yeah, the little LED is coming on, so it's definitely turning on now. And you can see the rest of the LEDs there just powering on. And you can see the little E logo there is red. That probably means we don't have any internet. We're close to the 5.5 watt. Definitely we do have the 4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz up and running there. So let's just go to the computer and actually go through the UI. So I did have to connect it to the WAN plug to actually get it working. So I guess for security reasons, it just would not start up or connect. But now I am connected to Wi-Fi. And here at my computer, you can see we are connected to Wi-Fi down in the right corner here to the Asus 00. And you just go into the router.asus.com and you will be taken through this guide here. So let's just set up new network. Unfortunately, it's my country. I'm not really sure, or in my language, not really sure how I can actually change that. Doesn't seem like there's anything right there. But anyways, let's go back, set up a new network, click the blue button there, and you have to select the SSID for your network. And you can also select here if you want to separate 2.4 and 5 gigahertz network. I definitely want that. So I have IoT1 for 2.4 gigahertz and IoT2 for 2.5 gigahertz. Let's move on. So if I wanted to enable Wi-Fi AX or Wi-Fi 6 mode, definitely want to do that as well. Let's move on again. Router login. So you need to log in with a password and of course a login name for this router. And let's move on again. So setting is done. Now, of course, you need to log into the Wi-Fi you just chose. And of course, the SSID and of course the password. So now we are logged into this 5 gigahertz band. And this is of course the Asus WRT UI. I really like Asus's firmware. Pretty easy to use. Had a lot of functionality. And I'm very familiar with it. And you can also see here, we are connected to the internet as well. With my WAN IP up there, which is my firewall. And let's just go through a speed test and see what kind of speed we actually get with this router here. Of course, we are on the Wi-Fi 5 gigahertz band, so it is Wi-Fi 6 as well. I do have a Wi-Fi 6E capable computer or Wi-Fi card in my computer, close to 800 download and close to or above 800 upload, close to like 830 upload there. So definitely very fast. So let's try the 2.4 gigahertz band and see what kind of speed we can actually achieve there. So we connected to that right now. So around the 170 megabits per second download and close to 160 megabits per second upload. So let's just go through the UI here and have a closer look at the router's function. So you have all of the tabs here on the left side. You can click through. You can see right here, if the internet is connected, click on pretty much all of these icons here. We'll take you through a sub-menu. And you can also get a little bit of status here to see how your little CPU and memory and so on is doing. So we do have the 512 megabyte of memory. And of course, we do have a quad-core CPU, 1.5 gigahertz. And if you have the AI mesh mode turned on, you can of course see your status here or what devices you are connected through. And also if you have some USB devices, you can of course also see them right here. Guest network. Of course, set up a guest network for your guests so they will not have access to your local network, your other devices, only internet. Definitely very usable. You can also just use guest network for your Internet of Things devices or smart devices connected to your home and isolate them this way. But of course, you can't really control how they will actually access your other devices and your phones and so on. This is just a set and forget feature. AI Protect. Of course, you can enable this to protect your network. So malicious websites, two-way IPS, and it can also prevent devices that are affected, block them completely, and you also have parental controls here. Of course, if you have kids, you can kind of filter what your kids are watching. And you can also click the little scan button here and see if there's something they recommend you actually do. So disable VPS, I always recommend doing that. Also disable UPnP, definitely go ahead and do that and only really pass through the ports that you actually need. So you won't have a security hole there. And of course, you can enable those other features so you get a nice overlook here of what you need to enable or disable to actually make your router a little more secure. And you can just click on one of the buttons there and it will take you straight into that settings. So I kind of like the setup. And of course, like I said, parental controllers are also hidden in here in AI Protect. So adaptive quality of service. If you don't have the best internet and you kind of have to share your bandwidth between a lot of devices, you can prioritize some devices, for instance, your TV for streaming or whatever kind of box you're streaming from, your gaming PC and so on. So it will have top priority over all of the resources you have for your internet. So this way you can actually set, of course, highest, high and medium and default or the lowest priority. Highest, for, of course, for the devices that needs the fastest internet and lowest for the lowest device or the device needing the internet the least. So it's kind of nice. And you can also go in and see some history here and just enable or disable it here. Traffic analyzer, also very usable. So you can kind of see what devices have had access to what websites or services. You can enable that here. So we have a little bit of log over all of the visited sites and so on. And you can also see traffic monitor here in real time. So you can kind of see what is sucking up all of the internet resources and get a nice graph here or a nice plot here in real time. USB applications. So you have, of course, all of these features here. AI disk, server center, network printer, 3G and 4G connectivity, and you can also use it for time machine, or download master, so you can install a download client, I believe for torrents or something like that. Of course, you need a USB device connected, so you can download directly to that. So nice little features. I tend not to use it. I maybe use the 3G, 4G in the future, just to have a backhaul into all of my smart devices that I want to connect to this one here. If something should happen, like with my WAN connection, I can still have internet to these devices here connected, like my security cameras and so on. AI Cloud 2.0, so it keeps you connected to the data wherever you have internet connection. So yeah, I tend to just leave these things on. It's just a security hole or potential security hole there, but of course you can use it if you want to. Wi-Fi is of course where you set up all of your Wi-Fi connection. You can also just enable Smart Connect, so you just have one SSID and it will automatically select which devices will be connected to 5 GHz and 2.4 GHz. I tend to have issue with that setup for me personally. So I've had devices that don't really want to reconnect and you have to reboot them and so on because of issues with Smart Connect. So I definitely recommend disabling that if you can. So you have 2 separate networks and you can just connect the faster ones to the 5 GHz network and the slower one, or the ones that require further distance or further away from the router, you can connect that to the 2.4 GHz frequency. But of course you have all the settings here for Wi-Fi, VPS. Go and disable that, makes it more secure so nobody can just connect to your device using the VPS button and get access that way. WDS, of course, wireless bridge mode, wireless MAC filter, radius settings. You have professional here if you want to go deep into all of the settings, and you have roaming block list as well. Over on LAN here, we do have the router name, IP address, submask of course, and of course if you want to enable or disable the DSCP server, and you can also assign IP addresses to specific devices down here if you want to have a static IP address for your computer or phones or so on. Kind of nice, and you can set your IP range here as well. Route for all your routing, IPTV, I guess for IPTV, and switch control, so you do actually have jumper frame on board if you want to enable that here. WAN, of course, all of the settings related to the wide area network, so the internet. One thing, of course, disabling UPnP is recommended, and you can select automatic, statics, or one of the other settings. Of course, you need to follow your internet service provider guide to actually get up and running here. I just have it on automatic right now because I'm connected to another firewall that is hooked up to my internet service provider. You can actually also run dual WAN on this little router. Quite impressed actually. It's a very cheap router, but you could use the USB as a secondary WAN, so it will automatically switch to USB 4G connectivity if something should happen to your main connection. Like I said, I have thought about that both with this one and also my main router. Sure, I'm going to use it. Port trigger is where you set it here, and of course you can, and virtual server or port forwarding, what you enable here. So instead of using the UPnP, definitely go here and port forward if you need something like Plex or WireGuard or whatever. You have to enable the port there, forward the port there. DMC, not too familiar with that. DDNS, you can enable the DDNS client as well here. And NAT pass-through, you can select what kind of services you have to or want to pass through your net. You also have Alexa and if this then that integration, and you also have IPv6. Still, personally, I'm on IPv4. Never really used IP version 6, not yet at least. Thought about it, but if you want to dive into that, you can of course just enable it here. You also have VPN on board, which is again pretty impressive for a small, cheap router like this. So you can have VPN clients. If you have a VPN server or a host, you can set up your client here. You can also run this as a VPN server, which is kind of nice. So both PPTP, OpenVPN, and IPsec VPN. Firewall, of course, something you should enable if you are connected to the internet and connected the plug into the WAN port on the back of the router. This is, of course, what will filter out any unwanted access to your devices from the internet. So you can enable and disable firewall, both for IPv4 and IPv6, enable DOS attack, and so on. And you can also set up specific filters, URL filters, keyword filters, and net service filter as well. And then we have administration. This is where you can switch between the different modes. I'm going to use mine in access point mode because I already have a firewall set up between this and my devices. I can also use it in a repeater or media bridge or AI mesh node system. Of course, all system related information and settings. You can change password, username, and so on here. Firmware update. I'll definitely go in and check for a firmware update and do that regularly just to make sure that you are up and running latest and greatest. Could potentially help out in security. There's some issues with the firmware or some loopholes for like attackers or hackers to get into your router. Those holes will of course be ironed out with future firmware releases. So check for firmware versions. Just click check there. You can also go to Asus's website. You can actually go directly here. Click on the link, Asus download link. Will take you through the download site and download the firmware there, and then just click upload and upload the firmware. Then we have restore, save, upload settings. You can leave feedback to Asus and your privacy information here as well. System log, of course, could be handy if you have some issues with the devices. You have a general log here of all of this stuff going on with your router. Wireless log, all log related to wireless. DHCP leases. Right now, we only have the one here. IP version 6 is of course disabled. Routing table, your port forwarding, and all of your connections. And then we have the network tools where you can ping other devices and also get Wake on LAN, which is kind of nice if you have a NAS server or so on and you want to wake it remotely, or if you're not at home, you can just log into your router and just click on wake that specific device, wake it up. Of course, we have nothing right now, but actually something I've used from time to time. And then we have this smart connection rule. If you have smart connection for your Wi-Fi, so it will automatically switch between 5 GHz and 2.4 GHz, you can set up your rules for that right here. So we've gone through the hardware and software and also ran a few speed tests. This little Asus router, definitely do like it. First impressions, very small and compact, very power efficient as well. And also kind of impressed by the speed. Because yeah, this is, like I said, a very inexpensive router and definitely pretty freaking fast. So kind of amazing time to live in when you have these very fast, cheap routers out there. And for now, definitely does get a little bit warm to the touch, but nothing really concerning at all. One thing I just noticed actually, the plug is so close to one of the antennas, it will kind of touch it if you twist the antenna towards the left. So definitely take a note of that so you don't accidentally damage your plug there. Other than that, I have no real complaints. I think it's a fantastic little router. And of course, you can find links down in the description below if you are interested. But that's pretty much all I have for this video. Until next time, take care.